Alright, as with many videos, the more excited I am about delivering the video and the more that I think that it's going to be a really good video, the more opposition I encounter. That's been the case with this one. I bought a Cutco knife, specifically the K-Bar. I don't know if you know, but they're both under the same parent company in Olean, New York, so it makes a great companionship, to have a K-Bar Cutco knife. I've had several Cutco knives over the year. I'm not going to turn this into a Cutco commercial, but to suffice it to say, I'm going to keep it in terms of a review, but suffice it to say I've had quite a few Cutco knives. My hunting knife of preference is the Cutco hunting knife. I've had a lot of experience with that. I've cleaned, dismantled, field dressed, and generally butchered several animals, a couple of elk, I think four deer, mule deer, big good sized deer, not the little white-tailed deer and beckies that are the size of my dog. I mean, I've put this knife through a lot of use, not this one, the hunting one, and I've been just completely satisfied, shocked, blown away. I can't believe how well the thing does without having to be sharpened over and over again. So that being said, when I was approached by a vector marketing sales guy, I was one of his first people that he showed product to. He showed me the K-Bar knife, and I've heard about these, and these are kind of in a class with I don't know how you'd compare it. They're kind of the product of World War II, along with the Jeep and along with some other famous rifles and things. So it's a little piece of history, and it's done right by the K-Bar company, but also specifically the Cutco model or the Cutco version. So we'll crack it open, take a look at it, and I'll go over a little bit of the anatomy of the knife. The knife's weight, I'll fire up the scale here and see if we can get a weight on it. This is my scale that I use for air conditioning, and apparently it's pretty unstable. We'll turn it on, let it kick in, we'll see what this thing weighs. We use a metric system around here. It's 350 grams. The knife's made in USA, Olean, New York. The sheath's made in Mexico, I'm not sure what part. It's 130 grams. And it's just a really nice knife. One of the things that's unique to this one specifically is that it has the Cutco serration. As you look at my little thing I drew up here, serration, they're also called rip teeth. Back in the day, that was the term that they used for it, so now we say serration. But it's this portion that you see here. And these are very sharp, and they do a really good job. They're based basically on the saw design. This is a portion of a band saw. This is made from tool steel, and the advantage of it is it keeps it cool. Each of these is an individual, ripping tooth. As I said, this is used to cut metal, and in a bandsaw design it helps to reduce the heat, but it's a very effective cutting surface, whether you're cutting something that's difficult, because the knife blade, it does a great job cutting with the grain, but with the rip teeth it does a really good job at cutting across the grain, like as though you're cutting through a log or something like that. When you're cutting a piece of rope or tendon or muscle material, or the things of that nature, that serration really does a good job to get through it. As far as the K-Bar brand goes, the origins start back in 1897 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A group of 38 guys formed a limited partnership, and they called it the Tidiute Cutlery Company. That's Tidioute Cutlery Company. And they wanted to manufacture and sell cutlery. The formation is now widely considered to be the beginning of K-Bar knives. In 1902, Wallace R. Brown bought the assets of the Tidiute Cutlery Company, and he applied to the governor of Pennsylvania to form a corporation. The corporation was called the Union Razor Company, and then they later changed it to the Union Cutlery Company in 1909, and they wanted to do that to manufacture and sell cutlery. In 1911, I hope this isn't too boring. You can be like learning and memorizing this in the meantime if you're not interested in the history. But in 1911, the Union Cutlery Company, they registered in Olean, New York, which ironically it's back there now. But they created two Union Cutlery Companies, and one of them was in Tituate, Pennsylvania. The other one is in Olean, New York. And then eventually the Pennsylvania plant closed down. The trademarks, during the 1920s, the trademarks like Olcott, Keenwell, and K-Bar are adopted and embellished on the knives. The owner of the K-Bar trademark, the Union Cutlery Company of Olean, New York, began using the name of its knives and advertising it in around 1923. They received a testimonial from a mountain man who looked like me. And the mountain man, he had really broken English, but basically he told a story about how he was able to kill a bear that had been wounded and his rifle jammed, and so he finished the bear off with the knife. And his broken English, due to a lack of education, not communicating with people on a regular basis because he's a mountain man, basically it said, in his own words, he said, kill ab R. That's K-I-L-L-A-B-A-R. Kill ab R. So they redefined this as K-bar. In 1942, the Marine Corps accepted a reworked design of the submitted knife. They had been putting out their feelers that they wanted some type of a combat knife. Now, I wish I had it out here. I've got a what's called a pig stick, or a bayonet that goes on a rifle, and rather than using the bayonets, because it makes the overall rifle length more cumbersome and difficult, and you get an issue with you've heard of friendly fire when you shoot somebody on your own team in war, with sticking people. So they wanted to go with a fighting knife, but they wanted to improve it. Some of the improvements that were made to the original fighting knife, let's see if I can remember the names of these things or find it in my notes. Let's see, they had a knife that they called the 1219C1, I think, and then this one, I believe, is the 1219C2 combat knife, and they later designated that the United States Marine Corps Mark II combat. One of the things that they wanted to do is they wanted to make it so that it was heavy duty and held up well. When you look at the knife construction diagram that I have here, normally knives are built with a blade and all that out of a blank. You can see that this is the tang portion here, and then you'll round this and thread it, and then you'll thread on pommel. The other ends of the knife name are the butt or the plate. This is squared up like a butt, which is a good strong design. See how big and square that is? It's not rounded or threaded. And the pommel slides onto that, and then you have a pin going through it. There's a number of different names for those pins that you see like in kitchen knives and stuff. I didn't really go into a lot of detail because it's not as pertinent here. The reason you see Bernard Levine, so I don't forget, is he's the authority on K-bar knives and the history of them. He's written a book about it. If you want more information, he's a good guy to go to. So anyway, this knife gets its origins in the current form that it is because of the request of the Marine Corps wanting a new fighting knife. So not only did the Marines adopt the K-bar, but also the Army, Navy, and the Coast Guard and underwater demolition teams. Years after World War II, many K-bar knives were unofficially reactivated in the Korean, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and Iraqi freedom conflicts. In 1952, the K-bar company changed its name to K-bar Cutlery, and that's a change from what it used to be called, which was Olcott, Keenwell, or K-bar. And before that, like I say, it was the Tituate Cutlery Company. So anyway, now it's just called K-bar. In the 1960s, K-bar is sold to the Brown family and subsequently goes through a series of ownership changes, ultimately being sold in 1966 to Cole National Corporation in Cleveland, Ohio. In 1996, the K-bar product line and assets were sold to Alcus Corporation of Olean, New York. And in late 97, K-Bar Knives Incorporated dramatically enhanced its national product distribution with the addition of 5 manufacturing representative firms whose territory spans the whole of the United States. In 2003, K-Bar moves to its current location 200 Homer Street, Olean, New York. So kind of made a big full circle. And as I said, Cutco, you see their symbol. Where did I put that marker? Their symbol looks like a diamond with a little silhouette on it. And if you go to the visitor center for K-bar knives, it looks something like this. This is just a basic representation. It's usually on the other side, but you'll see the K-bar, and then you'll see the Cutco on the other side of the awning of the building. You know, they're quite married, so it's, you know, interesting. When the specifications for the knife were adopted in 1942, there were a number of different companies that produced this knife. To this day, there's a number of companies that also produce the knife. This is like the American version of the Australian knife, or Nepali knife, called the kukri. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's got a really interesting shape because you have a blade and then it curves around like this. And then you've got your guard and your handle here. Imagine being whacked, and there's your pommel. Imagine being whacked in the head with that, and then it has fuller, you know, something shaped like that. So it's interesting. It's like a club knife. You know, you can really, you know, whack with it. So anyway, that's that. This is kind of the American version of that. The Nepalese or Nepal fighting forces that have used that kukri, I ought to just write that down what that is too. When I visited Nepal, I saw a lot of facsimiles of this knife in the gift shops, along with all kinds of knockoff products that said North Face but were made in China. Interesting side note. So anyway, you can see that the Tituet Cutlery Company, you know, which is now part of the Cutco K-bar company, has changed hands a lot. It's kind of like Jeep. You know, Jeep has changed hands a number of times. It's another company that was brought about, you know, the Willys Jeep, and then Ford produced it, and a bunch of other companies produced the Jeep for the war. Willys started in 1945 and selling them to civilians, and then Kaiser bought it in 1953, then AMC bought it in 1970, Chrysler bought them in 1987, and then Daimler-Benz or Daimler-Chrysler came about in 1998. They bought the company for $36 billion, and then a private equity firm called Cerberus Capital bought them out for only $5 million. Can you imagine that? A drop in price from $36 billion to $5 billion. Then they took on another $4 billion from the government in 2008 with the bailouts. But it's just interesting because you get these things that become so popular. I mean, like the soldiers that used them just thought they were amazing, and they became a good bush knife, a good, what am I, Australian? A good camping survival knife. I swear the more languages you learn, the more messed up your English becomes, at least when you're me. So anyway, it's just an interesting thing. You can see that this particular knife doesn't have the fuller, some of the other ones do. If you go on to Amazon and look up K-bar, you'll find good quality knives that resemble more the 1940s, circa 1942 knives that were in the Second World War. You'll find them for like $50. You can find really nice ones for $100. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I paid $170 for this one. You know, like part of the reason why I bought it was because it's just kind of wanting to support the sales guy and the efforts that he was making in his life. And the other part is just the whole relationship between my favorable impression of the Cutco knives that I've had from my hunting knife and kitchen knives, and then also just the nostalgia of the K-bar. You know, made this an easy decision for me to make. I really like to buy things that are quality, that are really built well. I was going to talk a little bit about construction of knives. You can see that I've got a couple of blanks here. These were made, I think these were made by Isco, which makes wrenches for Craftsman and about every other brand that you've ever heard of. But I got some blanks here, and what's interesting is, you know, they're cast and they're really crude. And as you can see, they're made out of really good steel, and that's why they rust, you know, just a little bit. But you round these off, and then once they're rounded off, you can take die from a tap and die set, and you know, you can put a tap or cut the threads into it, and then you do the same thing to the pommel. Remember the pommel over here, but you thread it, and then you can put the pommel on, and then the tang, you just have any kind of handle. You have a wood handle. This one's kind of a rubbery surface, but there's a lot of wood handles. Now you see a lot of handles being made from paracord, you know, a really strong rope-like material, and it's just woven back and forth over the tang. So I've made a few knives, and you know, I can appreciate the value of a good construction. Now if you're beating on the pommel of the knife, see how this just threads down on there now? If you beat on it, you can strip that out. Typically a pommel will be made of brass or some other type of soft metal, and they usually don't hold up to blunt force striking. There's different kinds of knives, like I said, where you just have a butt, where the tang of the knife is consistent with the ricasso all the way back, and then it's just you know, you can see the whole length of it, and then typically you'll have those pins through it to pin a wooden handle to each side of it, or like I say, there's oftentimes paracord ones now to where you can remove the paracord if you need that more than what you need the knife. This one's got a nice rubber handle. Like I say, with the wood ones, they really succumb to the elements, and so now a lot of them are made synthetic. This is like a hard molded rubber, and it's really good for grip, because you know, like if you're butchering an elk, I have a video on this channel as well. It's what to do after you get an elk. It shows you basically how to take them apart without having to gut them. You know, you just bone them out so you don't get bone sour. But you get your hands covered in blood and all this kind of gross stuff, and your knife becomes slippery, and it's so sharp, and you're working in close proximity with your other hand. And fortunately, I don't have a lot of scars on this hand because I'm pretty careful. But along with being careful, you need to be able to grip the knife well. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I did a lot of homework. I didn't know a whole lot about all this stuff to begin with, but I wanted to provide a good video that had some interesting detail and you know, things. So hopefully that paid off. A lot of people, the first thing they do with a knife when they get it is they want to do a paper test. This one, it does okay. It's great for stabbing, that's what it's made for. But to just start in the paper, it's not quite as good. And a lot of that just has to be the nature of the cut. The cut on the blade is just made to be like a kitchen knife, something that can really take a lot of abuse and banging and, you know, a lot of harsh, coarse things like that, and still maintain an edge. You know, like there's a difference, like I say, between a 10-blade scalpel kind of knife and a kitchen knife for chopping carrots. You see it does okay. You go to the serration, it just boogies right through it like it's nothing. So I'm pretty impressed with it. I like it. I think I paid too much for it, but oftentimes that's the case when you want to get the best. If you want a premium brand, they charge a premium price. So in terms of the structure and the quality of the knife, I would rate it a 5 out of 5. In terms of price, it's probably a 2 out of 5. I mean, it was way too expensive at $170. You could probably do a lot better with the less expensive ones. But if you insist on having the best and you'll really like the Cutco brand, then this is probably the knife for you.